Hello, brothers and sisters. It is I, Franklin Jones, the author of The Black Matrix. I hope life is treating you all well. I'm going to try to keep this video short today. This video is about narratives. Most people don't understand the significance of how narrative controls and shapes society. And those who create the narrative steer society because society functions based upon the narratives that are created and imposed upon it. This here is a picture of me in the military. The reason why I'm showing that picture is because the story, I'm going to use soldiers as an example to show you the way soldiers are manipulated and controlled and steered through narrative is the same way we Black people are being manipulated and steered by false narratives. And by showing you the picture, you will know I'm speaking from experience, from being inside, not an outsider. Now, before a war is preempted, those in high places, those at governmental level, they sit around together and they conspire. Let's say, for example, there's a country and it's within the national interest to stop an effort by this country, or we want their oil, and it's within the interest of the nation, they would declare war on those countries. Now, we all know this. That's common. We know when we talk about Iraq, but I'm going to break down the science behind it. Those in high places creates narratives because they know that the true narrative won't go. Could you imagine, for example, telling the soldiers in the Iraq wars, no, we know there's no real weapons of mass destruction there, but and we do want their oil, so just go for us. You would have a demoralized troops. You would have troops refusing to go. Troops refusing because they know the true narratives. So this is why those in power create false narratives and impose them upon the soldiers. And these narratives are always that we're righting a wrong, that these people are evil and we're the good guys. They may even give it a name, Operation Freedom. These are psychological warfare propaganda. They shape the minds of the nation in ways that supports the war. Now, once the soldier had received the narrative that he is the good guy, he's righting a wrong, now he will gladly feel his patriotic duty to go and fight in a war that's really meeting the agendas of the ruling elites. Now, once the soldier believes the narrative and accepts it's true, he goes to war and he kills total strangers. Kill them based upon the narrative. Some soldiers will lay down their lives and die on the battlefield because of the narrative. They will defend it to their deaths. Now, it doesn't matter that the narratives is untrue because people function based upon their perceptions that is true rather than reality. This is why social scientists says perception is greater than reality because people function based upon their perceptions rather than reality. So all you need to do is shape up people's perceptions in order to control them. And since people are controlled by the narratives, those who writes the narrative controls the people. The white society's greatest power over Black people is their ability to write our narratives and impose them upon us. They will say, Black people are the dumbest, pose it upon us. Black men treat their women better, treat the women worse than white men, impose it upon us. They create our narratives and impose it upon us, and then we function based upon those narratives. Now, and then once those narratives have been embedded into our minds, we then only notice those incidents that appear to confirm it. I'll give you an example. There are many Black women in the United States who are insisting that Black men are running in droves to marry white women. They're leaving us for white women. They're leaving us for white women. And when you talk to them, they will argue. They say, I know it. I've seen it firsthand. All of our women, all of you men, y'all only want women. Y'all only want white women. And they would tell you a story that they were sitting at a bar and a Black man passed them and went with this white woman. Because now they're only noticing those incidents that appears to confirm the programming. But here is the reality. According to the U.S. Census, 86.5% of black husbands in the United States are married to black women. Only 7% are married to white women. Now you're going to say, no, but when they get rich and money, they forget about us women. They run and get themselves a white woman. Untrue. The wealthiest black men in America, over 78% are married to black women. See, what happens is once you hear the narrative that they're all running to white women, you only notice that. Let me give you an example. Let's say you go out to a public arena and there are a lot of couples there. Now, they might be, let's say there are 300 black couples. And there are 20 interracial couples, a black man and a white woman. Now, you're going to look at those 20 and say, see, I told you, they're leaving us, but you become psychologically blinded from recognizing the greater number that refutes it. You are functioning based upon false narratives. Society functions based upon narratives. Like, for example, the white society puts it out that black people are on affirmative action, taking jobs from white people. And the narrative is repeated over and over and over, and people believe the narrative. The narrative is a negative propaganda about us. But in reality, the group that has benefited greatly by affirmative action were white women. So therefore, if white women are benefited the most from it, then the white family by extensions. So affirmative action has in reality benefited more whites than black people. The narrative they put on us is that we are the black women are the welfare queens. We're tearing down their system and they impose it upon us. But the reality is the largest recipient of welfare are Caucasian women. They create a narrative that most inventions that revolutionize the world come from white people, and that black people are the leashes of society that benefits from the great minds of white people. And we haven't invented much, and they impose it upon us. Our society functions based upon those narratives rather than what's actually true. The hidden reality is most inventions that have revolutionized the world were either invented by a black person or were inspired by an earlier invention by a black person. The reality is without black people, you wouldn't have skyscrapers because black people invented the air conditioning, the elevator, the heating system. Without black people, you wouldn't be able to get fresh food from grocery stores because a black man invented the refrigerator truck that takes your food to the grocery store. Without black people, you wouldn't have the modern PC. Without black people, you wouldn't have the tablet, the keyboard. The keyboard evolved from the typewriter, which was invented by a black man. You know, we wouldn't have traffic light was for the black man. Are you aware that the first open heart surgery was performed in a black hospital by a black doctor? And once he successfully completed the surgery, Europeans and whites from all over America came to the hospital to learn from him. The first in history to ever do an open heart surgery and a person survived. But because we function based upon false narrative, many black people say, I want a white doctor. I want a white doctor. Because we function based upon false narratives. The shared belief in a society are not shaped based upon facts. They are shaped by the narratives that are fed into a society. Therefore, the white society creates a narrative that exalts themselves and demoralize and diminish black people and impose it upon our society. And we function based upon those narratives. Now, according to their social scientists, they say this is necessary for maintaining white dominance because for a dominant group to maintain their position of dominance, the narratives that are fed into a society must exalt them above the other group. Think for a second. If our true narratives were placed into our school books, all of our affirming facts, if everything we've created was known in the media, this would erode the white society's social dominance over black people. For them to maintain their social dominance, they have to continually demean us and falsely exalt themselves. This is how they maintain their dominance. Those narratives creates false assumptions within the society that the society functions based upon as being facts. And they shape society in ways that benefits the system of white supremacy and harms the black population. People function based upon narratives. Okay, I'll use another example of narratives. There is this premise that black people are at war with police. And you always hear this narrative that comes up whenever black people try to protest the routine killing of black people, innocent black people by police officers. The quick response we get from the public is, they're declaring war on the police. We have to stand behind our police, support the police. You see, that's because they create the narrative that they first of all, they criminalize us, and they create a narrative that we're declaring war against police. But here is the fact. Every year in the United States, more police are killed by white men than any other group. So the real narrative, see, if that real narrative came forward, they couldn't use the narrative, we are declaring war on police. They used narratives to control society. Here's the reality. Whether how great black people are doing in this society, whether how great we're doing, we will never know it because they control our narratives and they maintain their dominance by keeping our morale low. They maintain their dominance by telling us false things about themselves that exalts them and that marginalizes us. This is how they maintain their social dominance over us. So when you say, man, black people, I think we curse, I think you're not realizing, you're not functioning based upon your true narratives. Just like the sister who insists that black men are running in droves to marry white women because that's all she's seeing. I had a person arguing with me and insisting that Asian drivers are the worst drivers. And I said, come on, don't say that. Don't stereotype. He said, well, how you mean? I see it with my own eyes. But here's the reality. That's not true. It's not true at all. But once it's been repeated enough, people start to believe it. And they start only noticing those incidents that appear to confirm the programming. Now, back to black people. You know, when black people say black people don't read, you know black people don't like to read. Here's the facts. There is no black person on the planet who can confirm that narrative based on his own experience. He heard it, and now he regurgitated it. When the people have been heavily demoralized, they start demoralizing themselves. But no black person who says it can prove it. He just repeats it, regurgitates it, degrading and denigrating his own people. His mindset has turned in such a way where he doesn't realize that he has become a part of the problem in this community. His collective aggressions have been shifted away from the white society and redirected against themselves. The white society controls us by the narrative, false narratives. You know, for black liberation to happen, we have to elevate our thinking. We have to start studying social science, the true powers of narrative, propaganda. This is how the white man controls things. For example, the white man created a narrative. Here's another example, and black people repeat this narrative and doesn't realize the racism in the narrative. When black people say, white people come from us, white people come from us. But do you know the facts? Do you know the scientific facts? No, you repeat it, regurgitate it, but you don't know the facts. The white man created the narrative that he is the highest evolved African Homo sapien who turned white as a result of migrating to the colder climate of Europe. And we Africans are the lower evolved. So the narrative that the white man says he comes from us is a narrative that places him above us. And if you notice all of the pictures that they depict, when they have the illustration pictures of the Darwin evolutionary chart, they will put white skin on the highest evolved, and they will put black skin on the lowest evolved, which subliminally conveys white superiority and black inferiority. But here is the reality, the scientific facts. Science have thoroughly studied DNA and found that Caucasians are not at all African albinos who turn white as a result of migrating from Africa to the colder climate. Science has confirmed that Caucasians, white skin, and animalistic hair type are the result of their Neanderthal DNA. Studies has also found that our melanated skin, our woolly hair, is a result of Homo sapien DNA. What the white society has done, they separate themselves from their cave-dwelling Neanderthal ancestors. and attach themselves to the African's origin. They remove themselves from the caves of Europe and place themselves upon the thrones. Excuse me. They remove themselves from the caves of Europe, yes, and place themselves upon the thrones of Africa. In doing so, they create a false history that supports the myth of their racial superiority. Now, can you imagine if the narrative was taught in our schools that while Europeans were living in caves, Africans were living in pyramids? Even though it's a fact, they're not going to let you have that because that narrative goes against the ideology of white superiority. So in every place where they're controlling our information, we're always being marginalized and they're always being exalted. Even if you look at our maps, if you don't know this, the maps that we see, Africa is made to appear 13 times smaller than its true size. And all the countries, white countries, are made to look significantly larger than their sizes. What's happening here? We're being subliminally programmed to believe in white superiority and black inferiority. Social scientists says it makes us more compliant with white dominance over our lives. We are functioning based upon false narrative. Just like those soldiers, when they're told that they're going to war to right or wrong, and they believe the narrative, that they function based upon the narrative, they interact with each other based upon the narrative. That's what black people do. We're interacting with each other based upon the narrative. Like when a black man says, because you keep hearing the stories that white women are a lot treat you better, right? And one day while arguing, it enters his conversation. He says to his black wife, I need to find me a white woman. They treat you better. And the black woman respond, yeah, so that's because they soft, that's because they're weak. That's the defense they tend to come up with. But here's the reality. A skin color is not a factor for how someone will treat you. It's not. The factors for how someone treats you will be their upbringing, a history of abuse, sometimes even a religion, or how they witnessed their parents treat each other. Those are the things that are relevant in how someone will treat you. But your skin color is not one. There is no truth in this narrative that because someone's white, they're going to treat you better. And then here's what happens. When you get with that white person, even though you're going through hell in your mind, well, if I was a black woman, it would have been worse. Untrue. Race is not a factor. But you see, the propagandist who steers our culture knows that the average people are not critical thinkers. The average people do not research facts. And because we have been conditioned to trust our oppressors, we relax and accept their narratives. We accept their narratives. But here's the reality. Throughout history, the white society's depiction of black people has never, ever been a true one. This has been a consistent fact for more than 400 years, and it's still a consistent fact now. But because our generation is not being educated to understand how the system works, because the oppressors will never teach us in our schools, we are being controlled by narratives. The white society's ultimate power is the ability to create false narratives that serve their agenda, impose it upon black people, and then have black people function based upon those narratives as if they're true, although they're not. Okay, I'm gonna give you an example that you all can relate with. In the black community, we know this. Right now in the United States, there are millions, I say again, millions of African Americans who hate the N-word and never uses it. But that narrative is never brought into the media. That narrative is never shown on film. They just ignore that narrative. They ignore those of us who hate the word. And they hire actors and they put on movies. They keep saying nigger, keep saying nigger, keep saying nigger. The narrative, they choose which narrative to give a national platform. So people arrive in America, believe that all African Americans call themselves niggers, when the reality is millions of us hate it. See, this distortion when people come to the country is because they're functioning based upon what they see. Our enemies control our narrative and what they hear. The way to brainwash a generation of people is by what they're taught, by what they see, by what they hear, and through constant repetition. Because the white society controls the education we're taught, the media images we see, and the societal narrative that we repetitively hear, these factors allows them to brainwash us. Now, it's important that we understand this because as long as we keep thinking that we're being controlled by Willie Lynch words, we will never liberate ourselves. Now, here's the difference between false knowledge and true knowledge. When you are given false knowledge, it keeps you in your place. It doesn't stimulate your thinking in terms of removing yourself from the situation. It doesn't elevate you. Now, when you get true knowledge, it expands your understanding. It expands your radius of what's happening. And now you're able to develop countermeasures to remove yourself from a situation, to defend yourself from a situation. This is why it's imperative that Black people start functioning based upon what's true. Because if our understandings are flawed, all remedies that stem from them will be flawed. We are not being controlled by fictional slave syndrome. We are being controlled by the monopoly the white oppressors have over our lives. They write all of our narratives, every bit of our narrative. They tell you that the narrative that Black children are doing the worst in schools. They tell you that Black people are more violent. They tell you every time you look around, every narrative about us are negative. Now, can you not realize how fictional that is? How crazy that sounds? How unrealistic it is? It's because they create a narrative and all of their narrative exalts themselves and marginalizes us. And those narratives, once imposed upon society, shape society in ways that aids them in maintaining their social dominance. Those narrative affects hiring and firing decisions. Those narrative affects how police interact with Black people. Those narratives are what we function among. But we're functioning, but we have a shared view of reality that's a false one. A shared view of reality that's a false one. You know, if it wasn't for a Black man, it wasn't for Black people, we could not communicate right now like we're communicating. But that's a narrative most of you don't know. We have this thing subliminally, thank the white man, thank the white man. But we could not communicate right now if it was not for Africans. Learn your true narrative and stop functioning based upon the white man's false narrative that he imposes upon you. And start studying the social science behind narratives. Those who control the narrative controls you. Those who control the narrative controls everyone who believes those narratives. Brothers and sisters, it's time to critically think. There is no group more than we Africans who need to critically think. Because not only does our information come from our enemies, but our information comes from those who have been proven themselves as being the most notoriously deceitful and unethical throughout history. These are the people who are controlling our narratives. Under these circumstances, it should be second nature to us first nature to us to always question everything we get from them. But they've socialized us to trust them and distrust ourselves. Brothers and sisters, it's time to wake up and understand there's a social science, and you address it like a social science, and you develop countermeasures against the social science. One love and peace, my brothers and sisters. One love and peace.